Message this morning is entitled Faith to Touch the Hem of His Garment, and the text is found in Matthew chapter 9, verses 18 through 22. We studied this Wednesday night. We saw a little bit of the video Wednesday as well. And I think the video is really good to kind of give you the setting and what all was going on. And we want to read from this text, and because there's a lot of action going on besides this event. This is kind of a side event, but it was a big event that took place. In Matthew chapter 9, beginning with verse 18 through 22, it says, "And while he was saying these things to them, a synagogue official came and bowed down before him and said, 'My daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live.' And Jesus got up and he began to follow him, and so did his disciples. And a woman who had been suffering from a hemorrhage for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak. For she was saying to herself, 'If I only touch his garment, I will get well.' But Jesus, turning and seeing her, said, 'Daughter, take courage. Your faith has made you well.' And at once the woman was made well. And the woman was healed from that moment." You know, Matthew, Mark, and Luke record this remarkable event, this sudden interruption in the life of Jesus with this lady who had a blood issue and had totally changed her life. She was a woman in desperation for healing. And you can almost see Jesus talking to his disciples about fasting when a ruler approaches Jesus whose daughter's just died, and Jesus was leaving with this ruler, and suddenly bursting upon this scene is this woman whose faith is uncharacteristic of our time, to touch the hem of his garment. Now we want this morning we want to take a moment and open our lives and to the life of this woman, and allow her faith to challenge our faith today. We learn a lot about faith from this woman. This woman's faith was tremendous. And as we look at her faith, we see that her faith was reflective of who Jesus really is. Faith is supernatural. It doesn't make sense sometimes. Natural world scoffs at faith. I mean, you can't explain it. Sometimes we don't understand it. And when it happens, incredible things take place. And so the natural world scoffs at faith. And although Jesus was in the natural world, he also worked in the realm of the supernatural. And this woman had tried all the natural means to try to be healed of her hemorrhaging of the wound that she had for 12 years. 12 years she suffered with this. Now, this was not just a problem physically. It affected her greatly socially. I mean, she was considered unclean. She couldn't hang out with any of her friends and a lot of her family. She couldn't go out in public. For the most part, she couldn't celebrate in the holidays and the festivities. She was considered unclean, and she might expose and she might make somebody else unclean. So it not only affected her physically, but it also affected her in every aspect of her life. In Luke chapter 8 and verse 43, we also see this story. Luke chapter 8 and verse 43 through 48. 3 times it's recorded. And in this text, it says, "A woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years and could not be healed by anyone came up behind him and touched the fringes of his cloak, and immediately her hemorrhage stopped. And Jesus said, 'Who is the one who touched me?' And while they were all denying it, Peter said, 'Master, the people are crowding and pressing in on you.' But Jesus, 'Someone did touch me, for I am aware that power had gone out from me.' For when the women saw that she had not escaped notice, she came trembling in the presence of all the people, and the reason why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, 'Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace.'" And I want you to think about the desperation that this woman had, how desperate. She'd been bleeding for 12 years. Now, in the Talmud, which is the book of teaching and opinion, prescribe 11 cures for hemorrhaging, but nothing worked. I mean, there wasn't a cure for her. She was in despair. She was desperate to have something take place in her life that would stop this, because it was affecting every aspect of her life. And having tried all resources, she was left to the realm of faith or the supernatural. She didn't have anything left. She had tried everything, and there was no place else to turn. But when she heard about Jesus being there and the healings that he had performed before, she thought, only if I touch the hem of his garment, I might be healed. And in Jesus, she felt the sense of this all-conquering power. She believed that he had the resources to make her whole again. Her faith allowed her to discover those resources that were available through Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. And she believed with all of her heart that somehow these resources of healing were there for her too. And even though she was unimportant, because Jesus, he was talking to a ruler of the synagogue, and his daughter had just died, and she was obscure, but she wanted help. And two things that bring men and women to Jesus Christ, and that are the deep felt personal need that we have in our life, and a genuine faith. And I want to tell you, everybody's got needs. And if you don't have a need today, sometime you're going to get a need, or you've had a need in the past. There are times in our life we have deep personal needs that nothing seems to be able to fill those needs. It might be a loss of a loved one. It might be an injury or a physical ailment that we have. It might be something going on socially with our friends or family or whatever. You know, the world's in turmoil. And we get wrapped up sometimes in these kinds of situations. We all have personal needs at various times. You may have one right now going on, a crisis taking place in your life, and you don't know what to do about it. There are two things that bring men and women to Jesus Christ, and that's a deep personal need and a genuine faith. And she had both of them. And she was accepted by Jesus. You know, there's no barriers to love. Faith knows no barriers. To place barriers upon our faith is really not faith at all. It's sight. And as this woman approached Jesus, there were no barriers to hinder him from loving her. Nothing. And the woman's need was a private matter. It's not something you want to just go out and shout to everybody. I mean, people finally got the picture, I'm sure, because she was showing up at the Jewish festivals and the events, and family, you know, we don't want to talk about so-and-so, but she's not here because of that. And it went on for 12 years. But in his love, the world says, it's in his love that we desire and we want and we need. And it's in those times of great need where the world says, leave us alone. Or friends, even sometimes Christian friends say, well, you think you got problems? You ain't heard nothing yet. Lonnie, you got problems? You haven't heard anything compared to my problems. And people are like that. They don't care in a lot of situations. But Jesus cares. And this woman had many barriers that had been placed upon her life because of her condition. She lived and she understood the barriers, but her condition, her state was no barrier for Jesus. See, love transcends all boundaries, all barriers in life. Love goes beyond. Not even the barrier of this interruption. You know, she had to go through, you know, she's thinking about this. You know, Jesus is in town and he's in this room, and we know that he's been in this house and he's talking to these real important people. And she's out there in the crowd and she's thinking this whole thing through. Now, when he comes out of there, if I can just get close to him, maybe things will change. And now, here he comes. Jesus is coming out of the house. And he's walking with his officials. They just told him that his daughter had passed away. And now she's thinking, if I can just ease my way in the crowd, if I can just get in there, if I can just touch the hem of his garment. And so this interruption, became an opportunity for this woman. And she was able to experience the love of Jesus. And Jesus, once she had touched the hem of his garment, Jesus is looking around. He says, the power has left me. And he sees this woman. He knows immediately what has taken place and her great need in her life. You see, her condition, her state was no barrier for Jesus. His love transcends all boundaries and all barriers in life. There is nothing that Jesus can't fix. I mean, we think we got problems. Jesus can fix any problem. Now, it may not make a lot of sense to a lot of folks. It may not make a lot of sense when we like to be practical about everything, don't we? And, we like things to make sense. But sometimes faith in action doesn't always make sense. No person in need ever interfered with Jesus' ministry, and that's even today. Her faith reflects the goodness of Jesus. That's the wonderful thing about Christianity, how positive, how good. I mean, you look at the world, if you were to take all the Christians out of the world, sometimes that's not always a good thing, I think about some Christians. But if you take all the Spirit of God out of the world today, and you think things are in a mess now, I mean, it will be utter chaos. And someday, it may be just like that. The Holy Spirit will be taken out of the way before the Son returns, or at the coming of his Son. And but her faith reflects the goodness of Jesus. When you can look at the laws of the land in America, and they reflect the goodness of the Judeo-Christian ethic and belief. It is goodness that turns our problems into opportunity for hope. Not our goodness, but the goodness of the Father through other people. Even in the darkest of days, there's reason, if you got Jesus, for hope. Jesus can get you through anything. He has the power to fill each life on earth with hope and with light, and that's a wonderful thing. And of all people, we shouldn't be sad, and we should have joy in our hearts, knowing that God is with us. And this woman believed this, and she experienced it. And she came just as she was. The woman's faith also brings us this fact about her faith, that we can go to Jesus just as we are. We don't have to get good enough to encounter Jesus. This woman had no other choice but to come to Jesus just as she was. Through all of her means of trying to be healed with no success, she now turned to Jesus. This was maybe her last resort. According to the Levitical law, that she was unclean. Now you just read Leviticus chapter 15, verse 25 and 27, and they took this pretty seriously. For 12 long years, this woman had no life. She wasn't allowed to take part in worship, any festival. She couldn't visit with neighbors or friends in fear she might make them unclean. Even family life that she lived was at a distance. Can you imagine being a a grandparent or a mother of children, and you got to be at the distance of those children. She was longing to have her life back. This was a great step of faith on this woman's part. What if Jesus refused to see her? I believe she thought of this, and that's why she sought out only to touch the hem of his garment without being noticed. And so she came to Jesus to be healed. And we've gathered the notion that we must somehow first make things right. We got to clean up our act. We got to clean ourselves up. We got to make ourselves worthy before we come to Jesus. But he calls us to come to him just as we are. And by our faith, we're ushered into his presence to receive his love and his touch of healing. And it is his touch that makes us whole again. And just like the third stanza of the hymn in your hymn book, just as I am, and tossed about with many a conflict, many a doubt, fightings within and fears without, O Lamb of God, I come. I come. And that's how this woman came to Jesus. Is our faith strong enough to allow us to make contact? Again, we're helped by this woman's faith. Her faith would not allow her to do anything but make contact. She just wanted to make contact. The single thought on her mind was, if I just get close enough to Jesus, if I just touch his garment. In Matthew 9:21, when she touched it, it was if. Let's read that text. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 21. For she was saying to herself, if I only touch his garment, I will get well. But Jesus, turning and seeing her, said, Daughter, take courage. Your faith has made you well. And at once, the woman was made well. Now, get this scene. This is a scene that's very dramatic. When this happened, it was like time stood still. I mean, it was like looking at a motion picture, and suddenly the picture stopped. And we're looking at this one scene of this woman reaching to touch his garment. And it's a beautiful thing about this scene, and that all at once in the midst of this crowd, Jesus, he's headed to the ruler's house. I mean, there's important things. There's a little girl that's passed away and died, and he's walking along. He's on a mission to go to that, and yet he feels something going on. The power has left him, and time stops, in a sense. And at that, for a moment, it seemed that for him and this woman, nothing else existed but this encounter, this little encounter. There's only 2 verses here. And Jesus, turning and seeing, said, Daughter, take courage. Your faith has made you well. It's an extraordinary story. She was not simply a poor woman lost in a crowd. She was someone whom Jesus gave his whole self to. And through her making contact, through her touching the hem of his garment, she was made well. Now, Mark chapter 5, verse 29 says, immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt her body, and she was freed from her suffering. How do we make contact? With God, or with his Son, Jesus Christ. It's by faith. It's by faith. It's supernatural. It doesn't make sense. I mean, you can't find it in the science books. You won't find it in the science book. You won't see a phrase that says, this is how you make contact with God. Do this. It's through faith in believing. You know, we don't need to study theology or even hear a sermon preached. We simply need to reach out by faith to God and His Son, Jesus Christ. And we have to learn to touch Jesus where we are. And sometimes places where we are at may not be too good of places for us to be at. And so it's in our affliction, it's in our weakness, and in our strengths that we have to learn to reach out and allow Him to touch us with His healing. The question is, where are you at in your faith? Are you still trying to live on the practicality of man? Well, like Spock, you know, has to be logical. Doesn't make sense. Can't figure this thing out. Right? Don't you love those old Star Trek shows where Spock comes in on the scene, you know, and he's perfectly logical about everything? I want to tell you, everything isn't logical in the realm of faith. Because God works in the supernatural many times, as Jesus did. They're like what the young people are studying in the book that Lonnie's referring to in his lessons, written by the guy, what's his name? I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. I don't know about you. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist either. I mean, when you really get into the nitty-gritty of how this all came together, I mean, it's astronomical, to say the least. It's unbelievable. It's supernatural. Some of you are dealing with issues in your life that plague you and have for years, and you've tried to deal with them in your own effort only to find it's not working out too good. Some of you may have been struggling for 12 years. Problem's still there. So it's time to exhibit faith that is supernatural and come to Jesus Christ just as you are and make contact with the Son of the living God. He can fix us. Or He can fix whatever problem it is that we are dealing with. And it has to be a conscious decision to do so. It just doesn't, it's not like an apple falling on your head. Or an asteroid that's little hitting you in the back or whatever. I mean, you have to consciously decide, like this woman did, to step out and reach out for Him. We need to quit trying to improve yourself and come just as you are, to give up and let Jesus, to touch the hem of His garment. We simply need to come as we are in faith, believing that He can touch us and heal us.